this is Daniel Queen, and welcome to another edition of Color Me Poetry. We're here. We got a great show for you today, and welcome to a brand new season. We have a poet with us, the most illustrious poet, beautiful work, and his name is Y.Jamal-Ali-author. Brother Author, tell us about your work and how long you've been writing, that type of thing. We want to get right into it.
Well, I've been writing for about 17 years. I'm originally from Detroit, and I've been living in Los Angeles for the last 17 years. I'm visiting the D.C. area right now. But I do a lot of different kinds of writing, poetry, stage plays, screenplays, historical essays, journalism, a lot of different kinds of things.
Well, we want to talk about all of that. I wanted to say that I met you a couple weeks ago. We did a reading here in town up at the Cobos.
Right.
And it was a great reading. We had great discussion. You know, I love to have a great discussion, you know, with other artists and share ideas and that type of thing. That's important, don't you think?
I think so. I think that the exchange that happens as part of the artistic experience is very important, because that's where you are able to take the ideas that you put into your work to the next level and get some feedback, because I think feedback is a very important part of the artistic experience.
It is, because you need to. I remember being in school, in high school, and even in college, where we had discussions on literature, and we'd sit in a circle, and people would share their work, and the only grade you could get out of the class was an A or an E, and you got your grade based upon how well you critique other people's work. So it was kind of strange, you know, but it was good, because that's a growth process, learning and just sharing ideas, and that's the way they do it in the African method. Everybody sat in a circle, not all the chairs sitting straight across in the row, but just sitting in a circle, and that way you could better communicate with the people around you.
Well, it makes everybody more equal also, and I think that that whole critique process, which I have been participated in critique workshops in LA for a number of years, is very important to the artist in terms of refining your work, because even if you write in isolation, even if you do readings, the feedback that you're getting is just essentially from the public, which is important, but the feedback that you get from other artists is what helps you refine your craft. I mean, what the public feels about Michael Jordan is important to him, but is not as important to his quality as the other players in the NBA. It's his peers, right? And
that's important too, because we all need that. In a sense too, that's a support network also.
Absolutely.
For all artists. That's why the African American Writers Guild, I think, is so important here, that we have here in this area. We have the African American Writers Guild, where we have an association of different artists, all kinds of artists in the literary field that come together. Also, a visual artist, you know. So it's a beautiful organization. Tell us about your work and your creative process. How, like, when you do a piece, because you write plays and screenwriting also. How is it that you get into a piece?
Well, it's for me, it's a dynamic process that's connected with experience in terms of going through your everyday life, and you see things going on around you. Particularly if, you know, I'm something of an African historian, scholar. I've written some material on that. Matter of fact, I'm working on a research piece. This could be a book I hope to publish in '93, dealing with ancient architecture and Nile Valley civilizations. And I think that that's very important for African American artists, to have a knowledge base that is connected with our history and our culture over time back into antiquity, to be able to integrate that into our material and bring that out for the public. For me, it's about weaving all of that together. One of the pieces that I would like to maybe, you know, to get in later on in the program is a piece I wrote called Virgin Sacrifice, that deals a lot with the problems that young African American males have been having in the urban environment in America in the 90s. The problems that we're having in the urban environment as well as outside, but particularly in terms of cultural identity. Those are things that are very important to me, and unfortunately, as you and I have discussed before, that is an area that many African American artists don't address, or don't address enough, or put enough emphasis on.
Why do you think that is? Because it's important to have rites of passage for not only the young brothers, but the young sisters coming up too.
As well. But I think that part of the problem goes back to a compromise process. A poet friend of mine in LA uses a phrase which he calls nuppies. People have heard of yuppies and buppies, black urban professionals. Nuppies are Negro urban professionals who are that much further removed from their cultural identity. And I think that there are a lot of people who feel that success is a function of their capacity to assimilate, as a function of their capacity to refine and define their own cultural identity and bring something polished to the mix, as opposed to just being part of this, soup instead of being part of the stew. You bring a certain flavor, a certain taste to it, and enhance it in that way. And I think that that's a major misunderstanding about this mythical idea of the American melting pot.
When some writers I ask, some black writers I ask, well, are you a writer first or are you a black writer? They shy away from that. Is there something? Nah, I'm not afraid. Yes, I'm a black writer. I write for the cause of liberation for my people, and I don't pull any strings about it.
Well, I agree with you. I think that whatever you produce comes out of the context of who you are. What you produce does not come first. It's a function of who you are.
I can't separate myself from who I am. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't write pieces that's not universal and all people can relate to. It doesn't mean that. But just mean that's my spiritual base, and that's my genetic base, really.
Well, I would like to take it a step further and say that one of the things that I think that a lot of Europeans have problems with around the so-called Afrocentric perspective of history
versus
and all the rest of
multicultural.
Right. That the reality is that there is no difference between an African perspective and a universal perspective when you start dealing with the fact that the first people on this planet, the first human beings were African, and the first human culture was African, then anything that followed from that had to be a derivative of that. And I don't care how many branches you graft onto the tree, whatever fruit it produces is a function of the tree, not a function of the branch. So that means that all the culture that's on this planet at some level is derived from African culture. So when you want to talk about being universal and going back to basics, when you go back to basic traditional African social values and social development, you're talking about a universal human perspective. And that's why a lot of people say, well, we talk about black, Negro, African American. I prefer to say that I'm an African living in America as opposed to being an African American, because my geographical location is a function of circumstance, not choice.
It always disturbs when I hear people say the African slave trade. It was not the African slave trade. It was the European slave trade.
Right.
And say, well, we were slaves. No, we were enslaved. That's
Right.
what I say.
Well, I think it's very important. I think that in a lot of ways we still are. And I think that again, another issue when we start talking about the importance of political and cultural consciousness, we can no longer, as members of the world community and as members of the African diaspora, continue to function as though cultural awareness and political awareness are not necessary elements. I mean, scientists can no longer be politically neutral. They have to be aware of what it is that they're doing and how it impacts the whole. Everybody must know what is going on and how everything is interconnected. Otherwise, you're going to get lost.
And I think that's the same thing, really, that Dr.